up from San Antonio. The only thing that I've got is what I've got on. Well, I ain't got a dime, but what I got is mine. Ain't rich, but Lord, I'm free. Amarillo by morning, Amarillo is where I'll be. I left my wife in Houston, broke my leg in Santa Fe. I lost a wife and a girlfriend somewhere along the way. When they open that gate, I'll be bucking for it, but I hope that judge ain't blind. Amarillo by morning, Texas is always on my mind.
Excellent, John.
Bravo, bravo, bravo.
Very good, very good. I'm inspired already. Well, welcome everybody. The Digital Roundtable gang is here today, and we are all full of thankfulness. It's been a interesting year, exciting year for many, crazy year for others, bad year for some. So let me go around and just say hello to my cohorts. Llewelyn, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. And you're right, for some of us it's been a bearable year, and for some people it's been a very terrible year. But across the board, people are getting very tired of the isolation, and it's extraordinarily hard on people who live on their own. For Thanksgiving, we have had a friend come up from New York with great trepidation whether she should have, but she was climbing the walls living on her own in an apartment in New York. These things are very difficult for a lot of people. Also, it's extremely depressing to see the number of people waiting to get food from food banks. That is not how it should be. And my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, absolutely. John, how are you today?
I am doing fine, and I will reflect the wonderful words of my colleague. It just goes to show you, as we talk about technology, as we talk about doing things online, which we are, that we are at best, as we turn our head to the ocean and to the seas, we are a people of social networking. We must be around each other. It's fascinating to me to look at the juxtaposition of one hand on people saying you should stay at home, all the medical people, and then there's a report about the airport. And the airport is full. We're back to the early days. So in March, we're back to that travel, 3 million, 4 million people going through airports. So the social has interacted with the digital, and I think the social has won. And we are habits of social, and we are habits of digital. And the economy, I think, has got to be a rebuilt for those unfortunate individuals who found themselves in the social. That is, they had to work to really, really be around people. And of course, their jobs were gone. For those of us who did it digital, it was a bit better, but on the whole, it's just not good. It was a bad, bad year. The only good thing about it is that Kansas will start to play basketball today.
Are you discriminating about sport or any sport?
Well,
so long as there's a ball in motion, Johnny's happy.
I'm happy. Our host here is a big Kansas guy in basketball. He went to KU, where basketball was invented. So I know that he's elated today that Kansas would start playing basketball, because Llewelyn, the other ball, football, they did not have to worry about social distancing because nobody ever came to the games in the last 60 years.
Well, I want to tell you that basketball used to be, when I was a boy, was played only by girls, and it was called netball. And it was a girls' game, a bit like hockey, which was field hockey, which was primarily a girls' game. So somewhere this all changed, and it became the game it is today.
It did. Well,
Well,
it was
so
all
basketball was invented by John Naismith in Massachusetts, and then he moved to the University of Kansas to start the basketball and league.
When was this? Because going back, netball, which is the same game, went back a long way, but it was something for the girls who weren't very good at sports to do.
So just to give you an idea, the first ever national championship of basketball for colleges was awarded in 1922.
Okay, well then maybe that came first. I don't know. I don't know.
Absolutely. So let me switch tracks and basically give you a teaser on the fact that I'm excited. December is coming. We have a great guest on December 2nd. Jay Zollner, the CEO of Kiwi Power, will be with us. He was the former CEO of Edison Energy here in the U.S. And Kiwi Power is a UK company, not a Kiwi company from New Zealand, but a UK company that it's in the demand response, distributed energy management sector entering the United States. So he's going to be with us as a guest. And then another great guest that we have on December 16th is Alexander Keros. And Alexander Keros is the chief architect of electric propulsion and in charging infrastructure for General Motors. So I'm excited that we're going to have an interesting conversation with both of them. And obviously, we're always in the lookout for bright, interesting people to add guest speakers. But let me kind of round up where we are. So it's almost 30 days to go kind of thing before the year is over. And COVID is the death toll in the U.S. is 250,005. It's up 10,000 from last week. It's trending up. There's all kinds of spikes going on. The total cases nationwide is 12,498,734 as of early this morning. I'm sure it's grown a little bit by now. And it was up from last week by 1 million cases, which is kind of crazy when you think about the fact that 1 million cases were added in just 7 days. So clearly the cold weather is not helping, and everybody has to be very vigilant about what's going on. On the good side of things, it seems like the expectations of 2021 are fairly high. The Dow hit 30,000 for the first time ever, and it's slightly down today, or at least when I did my update. Let me see where it's at right now. Yeah, it's a little down. It's in the 28,800s, 350 points up from last week. The New York Stock Exchange Index is at 14,000. Up 424 points. NASDAQ index is 12,000, up 300 points, and the S&P is up 3628, up 48 points. So the forecasters of the future have very high confidence on 2021 and the sort of the setup that we have economically and fiscally. I think a lot of people are very excited about Yellen being the Secretary of Treasury, and so we'll see how that all plays. Oil crude prices have gone up quite a bit, which is good for the oil guys. The local production is up $3.85 to $44.84, and gasoline, a gallon of gasoline in the greater Austin area has gone down 3 cents again, and we're down to $1.49 per gallon. Who would have thought? So what are you guys' take? The economy, the election, the table is set for a recharge, 2021. The vaccine is about to be released. What are you guys' take, Llewelyn?
Well, the first thing I think is that governments across the world, after we get a vaccine are going to have to persuade people to get vaccinated. I've done an informal survey among doctors I cover, the different interests I have, and they think it'll be 1/3 will get the vaccine, 1/3 will wait to see what happens, or if they think there's a better vaccine, and 1/3 simply won't get it. Other surveys think 50% of us will not get vaccinated. If that is true, the virus is going to be with us for a long time. It's going to be a great while before it's eradicated. It'll be reduced, but it'll be a fact of life, and that's very dispiriting. On the upside, there's all kinds of possibilities going forward, new innovation. Some of it spurred actually by the virus. In medicine, for example, there are going to be advances that we had not, which would not have had the goad to go forward without. Just in the areas that I'm interested in and cover, people are looking at the brain in new ways, looking at inflammation in the brain and using low-level radiation to treat it, for example. One man has had some success in treating Alzheimer's with CT scans, reducing the inflammation and improving the quality of life for the patient. So the memory is better, the socialization is more possible. It's all very early, but it's very helpful. And this is going to extend across every time you have a great cataclysm in society, new things appear, old things disappear. Wars, alas, do a lot for innovation. And indeed, almost any big project produces innovation. And I want to say about the development of vaccines, this is the equivalent, worldwide, it's been the equivalent of the Manhattan Project. The speed with which vaccines have been developed and tested is extraordinary. It is a massive effort, it's taken a lot of money. On the downside of this rosy future, is the fact that governments are now more highly indebted than they have been since the Second World War. All of the governments of the world are indebted. There seems to be a lot of money to finance this debt, but it's not clear how they're going to jettison the debt. And will it be done just with growth, or will it be done with punitive new taxation? We don't know. And this is a choice facing every government, not just the US government, but what we do may set the world standard for how this enormous debt that has been taken on to support the economy will be serviced and finally reduced. So there are a lot of challenges and a lot of excitements, even new ways of looking at economics. It is not looked at as rigidly as it was even a year ago. All the great economic universities are having something of a rethink about the fundamentals of economics. And that's big stuff, because economists have a big input into political thinking after they've digested something and then started propagating it as an idea.
Right, right. Johnny?
I think this, thank you for those great comments, but you know, we also had a crisis in democracy here. It was good to see how the country and democracy has withstood. Isn't it amazing how hundreds of years ago, the founders of the Republic, who put in the legislative branch and the executive branch and the judicial branch, and how that came to work. What is very, very interesting, and I would like Llewelyn to comment on this, is we have a series of presidents giving executive orders, which was not intended by Montesquieu, who wrote the basic research for why we should formulate America like it is today. I find it amazing that we're not using the legislative branch to really make laws, and the executive people are just giving executive orders. So I think that's pretty interesting for the old republic. So the first crisis that we had on top of all of the virus was the election. And in times of crisis, the question is, how well does the structure hold? When the iceberg hit the Titanic, the question was, could the structure make it right again? So what I think we found for all students of democracy is that democracy and its cages that were built to protect it have stood the test of time so far in this turbulent era as when we had an election. So we got to realize that we're just going through a historic kind of crisis there. The other thing is on the stock market, of course, we have taken away a lot of the uncertainty. We all know that investors and investments relate to uncertainty. And it was tied, of course, to our election here in America. But it went up to 30, it was booming, and we probably will continue to boom. And of course, that's an indication of how people think that they can really create the future. So I think that we saw that in the past, of course, the stock market would respond to that. But on the other hand, when you take away uncertainty and put a deal of certainty, it really goes. I have been interested in my own research as not only the movement of the economy, but what people do. And that right now, I'm doing a paper with big data with a scholar from a professor from Duke University, Brian Stevens, and Rajiv Garg from over in Atlanta at Emory University on what is happening in terms of the matching of people now with what they will do. And what the data shows is that there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of movement from the startup position to the other position, a lot of movement from medicine to other positions, a lot of movement from other positions into medicines. So as Llewelyn just said, whenever we have a pandemic of this sort, it affects not only the genetic structure of our bodies, it affects how we think about the world around us. And in this paper where we just let things flow, it's just amazing at the movement and how people are asking, what am I going to do in the future? It is almost like we have put another variable in the algorithm of life, as you will. And when they went through the pandemic and they looked around, they looked at their savings, they looked at how the nature of work would be readjusted. They're looking at how perhaps corporate America might give up on the whole idea of space or buildings. It's just amazing to me how people are basically moving around. But I think in the end, Andreas, the old country stood up to the founders' dreams of the Republic, and the Republic reacted in interesting kinds of ways. But I think the Republic will win again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I say all along, our federation, it's a wonderful design, and it would be impossible to overtake it no matter what, because of its fragmentation by design with states and cities and counties and the like. And I think the Constitution is the most amazing document ever written, and it will stand the test of times over and over and over. So let's switch to kind of gauging what's going on in the telecom space. 5G accelerating. Verizon just acquired a company called TracFone to be the largest prepaid phone services provider in the U.S. Interesting move from a carrier point of view to own a prepaid handset company. It's a telltale of what's going on with the M&A, mergers and acquisition trends. Hewlett-Packard's Aruba's division of networks, it's coming up with new products to attract the CBRS market for indoor building on 5G. Again, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise making a big move on helping companies build their own 5G networks inside their own campuses and buildings. Another telltale of what's happening. The FCC voted to open 5.9 gigahertz frequency to Wi-Fi for unlicensed spectrum, and also to CV2X. So this is something that we're gonna hear more and more about because we all drive cars. But CV2X is a new telecom standard that has been created over the last 5 years by the Society of Automotive Engineers and the IEEE and is the preferred network of choice for cars to talk to the autonomous infrastructure that they talk to as they drive across the road. So 5.9 gigahertz will be used also for autonomous vehicles, and stay tuned what that means, but it's really the beginning of, Wi-Fi and CV2X melding into a backbone of 5G, so the autonomous vehicles can run, say, from Dallas to Austin on I-35 corridor without anybody driving them. And I'm happy to say that we're doing R&D on that on the CIEDAR Consortium that I'm working on. And then last but not least, Vodafone Ireland deploys Open RAN to 30 cities. So Vodafone, which is a carrier like Verizon in Europe and one of the largest ones in the world, is deploying 5G infrastructure at 30 cities in Ireland to basically create the infrastructure needed for all the Irish cities to be at the vanguard. So the push for 5G continues, telecoms, setting up the infrastructure for the future. A lot of folks are saying that over and over, and we have talked about it, that Industry 4.0 and where the world's heading requires this kind of new infrastructure for fast broadband, low latency capabilities. So anything you guys are hearing on the acceleration of digitization with telecommunications? Any tidbits? Any thoughts?
Well, I think it's very interesting as 5G flies around the globe. We always say that the network is everything, but this has the ability to slice and dice the network. That is, when we look at what we call just network theory, the network is basic. But what 5G has done, it will allow the network operators to really have skin in the game when it comes to financial kinds of decisions, and of course, finding customers. So when I say slice and spice the network, that means that as a customer, wherever we are in the world, you can find us.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we want to do in the world through innovation and automation, we can do that. So it's not so much the ability to reach people, it's the ability to make the network operators king. If we look at what goes on in technology, they must always locate and find the customer. Without customers, then of course there are problems. And of course, with a global network of customers, the question becomes, how do we find them? So the first thing is that the splicing of the network, that is, of being able to put it anywhere at any time to find me and you, will be huge. The new king of the economy might be those people who control and understand those different kinds of networks. So if you have any kind of enterprise, all of a sudden, the network is not only important for the finding and the maintaining of new customers, it is paramount for that kind of activity. The other thing it's telling me is that a lot of these acquisitions would just say, in order to have an M&A or an acquired company, you must have the revenue. And the Austrian Schumpeter taught us a long time ago that unlike Karl Marx, who thought that profit was something that was stolen from the worker, profit is really a cost. The cost of being able to compete in the future and the cost to survive creative destruction. So I think, as Llewelyn said, as economists rethink their basic theories, especially equilibrium economists, who have really taken innovation and entrepreneurship out of their equations, what we find is that those companies who took their revenue, who took their profit and created it and treated it not like a profit, but like a cost,
Mm-hmm.
then you will find that they themselves will actually profit in this new era. So it won't surprise you that Amazon can be anything it wants to be. So it bought, of course, Whole Foods, the Longhorn, John Mackey, who started Whole Foods. Michael Dell went from Dell Computers to Dell Technologies by purchasing technology-based companies. But
Mhm.
5G will change the entire economic landscape of how we find people, how services are delivered. And Andreas, I've used your comment on how we can have farming anywhere on the globe by using 5G as a case in my classes.
Yeah.
It would be just as big as any network, but most networks cannot splice and dice like 5G will be able to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's some of those things you just said are quite brilliant and quite superb. And I so much like the idea of profit as a cost, not as a taking. And that is unfortunately not well enough understood in a great many companies, and particularly not very well understood by stock market analysis analysts. I used to have a television show with my wife, Linda Gasparello, on the stock market. And one of the things we found out was how the profit motive is misunderstood, and the profit use and the profit leverage is greatly misunderstood. And you have just explained it with great eloquence, and I thank you for that, Johnny. I wonder about 5G only because I've seen magic things over the horizon before, and sometimes they've had huge impact and sometimes they haven't. We had a tremendous excitement about different things a long time ago that didn't happen. Hydrogen, which is now a fuel coming back into use, was heralded in the 70s and it went nowhere. Supercomputers were supposed to make all the difference on Earth, and they made a difference, but not the dramatic overnight change that we were anticipating. And other things, for example, anything that got rid of resistance in transmitting electricity, they found out it had to be done at cryogenic temperatures, and it wasn't the wonderful thing that we thought that basically the removal of friction from electric movement would produce. As to mergers and acquisitions, I'm very leery of them because big companies often, and you're watching it now, possibly with the utility companies, where you will see mergers, not because they help the public, but more because there's no growth in the electric utilities, not enough profit in them. So they can simulate growth with mergers, but it doesn't leave anybody necessarily 10 years or better off. I don't think that, increasing the customer base from say 2 million to 5 million really makes a lot of difference to the quality of service, and it may in fact diminish that. So I think we have to wait and see. I'm not as excited about 5G, but I also would like to say a word about startups. And please don't think of startups as only things that involve communications, computers, electromagnetic forces. Startups are things across the globe, across the whole spectrum of business. And they're going to be great opportunities because they're going to be a lot of companies that fail, leaving a vacuum, leaving a space. Think of restaurants. Maybe 70% of our restaurants will fail. We may have a lot of hotels fail because while they have the nameplates of big chains, they're often locally owned. I read that if they don't get some help from the government, more than 60% of them will fail, but that will leave a vacuum, a space to be filled. New startups, new entrants, new ideas on how to do it. So when you say startup, don't think only of high tech as the only place where startups can be profitable and are important. We're going to see startups everywhere, and they all deserve the same degree of incubation.
Agree.
I agree. Andrea, let me ask you about 5G and the connectivity of things. That is, from a purely, mathematical point of view, it means that there be lots more things connected to this rapid 5G network. In other words, the Internet of Things will certainly just explode.
Yeah. So the numbers are the following. We have roughly in the United States about 1 billion things connected to the internet. Some 390 million phones, some people phones, and then a bunch of infrastructure. So roughly 1 billion things, and according to all the experts and futurists and the like, it's going to go from 1 billion things today to roughly 100 billion things in 20 years. So the impact of that is dramatic, right?
I think so. I mean, and I guess that relates to how they will find their customers,
Right.
and kind of things.
Right.
I think you're in a little delay on your computer these days. You are.
I do have a delay. I don't know what's going on.
I've got a notice on mine which says bandwidth is inadequate, that we're not getting the Wi-Fi bandwidth need. And throughout the broadcast, there's been some disconnect between your voice and your face. It's badly synced, Andre.
Got it.
But can I just go back to superconductivity, which I quoted, and which was
Sure.
going to touch things. I was summoned to the Southern Governors Conference, that's yours, Donny, to give a talk about superconductivity and how it was going to change everything. But it never arrived in any amount. We don't have superconductivity. It hasn't therefore changed everything. And it's not even a goal the way it was a goal. What are the chances that 5G will not deliver everything that you're expecting?
I think that's one of the things we do not know. But what we do know is the expectations, and the difference between 5G and the other stuff is that the ease at which people can connect to the new technology. It is almost like catching the wind as it runs along. So the number of billions of people, as Andre just said, will really exponentially increase. So I think that 5G is just additional ways of doing what we do now.
Yep.
It means we'll be bothered more as customers. That means that people will always know where we are. That means that the Internet of Things, everything from the smart house, right, to the smart automobile, is connected. And I think when industry begins savvy about this, then the question becomes, how can 5G increase their ability to connect to the customer and also to continue to provide profit for its shareholders?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that's what's that all about.
Yeah, I think that, I hear your concerns, and obviously nothing happens over a weekend, but I think that the amount of infrastructure investment and the amount of companies behind it is just daunting. And I was actually going to share today that my wife discovered a new thing for the holidays. So, going to the store is very complicated during Thanksgiving. You're going to be in line for a long time. And then you can actually sign up for delivery, but usually those queues are already signed up. But so my wife ran out of options last night, and we are Amazon Prime members, and Amazon owns Whole Foods. So she ordered everything she wanted through Amazon earlier this morning and got it delivered by 10 a.m. for free.
Oh, wow. I'm an Amazon Prime. I need to look at that.
So am I.
I didn't know that Amazon was delivering groceries in 2 hours.
This raises a very interesting question, and that is, delivery is everything at the moment.
Absolutely.
I've just got a new computer, and of course it came in 2 days from Amazon, whereas a local supplier wanted, I don't know, and Direct Dell couldn't deliver till late in December, but Amazon could get it out the door somehow.
Yeah.
However, I haven't seen the growth I would expect in startups in delivery. Are there new companies being formed just to deliver? I haven't heard of them, and I would like to.
Yes, there's a company called Go Heavy in Dallas. We have 2 customers that are in that space. out at CMG, and I'm happy to talk to you about them. Yeah, delivery is the hottest thing right now to be invested in, and it's not very high tech, right? It's all about a scheduler in the cloud, and really it's a gig economy play, bringing together all kinds of different ideas. So there's several slices of that delivery, and there are different markets of that delivery. So the answer is yes.
The Uber getting into food delivery, cooked food, which is, I thought, very interesting use of its network. But I just wonder if the Acme Delivery Company and the AAA Delivery Company and the Jim Smith and Sons Delivery Company is going to burst out and suddenly become major players, giving some rivalry to FedEx and United Parcel Service.
Well, let me give you an example from the Butler file. So we bought some outside furniture, and I said, well, I can't put it in my car, and it was like Uber. I pulled an app down, which they informed me to do, and said where I was, and people came with their trucks and delivered it right to my house. Now, I did not even know that existed, and that was a year or so ago.
That's very interesting. So this actually fits in my point of all startups are not alike.
Right.
That's right.
There may be 6 people with a truck, and next thing there'll be a very large company, which is what happens.
I think you're exactly right. I think in Austin here, in my world, it's tech startup because of the relationship between investing and patents. But you're right, startups are everywhere. It's just that in my world, we deal on patents and investments and not what we say, the company becomes a commodity. But these companies could be really, really, really great, huge companies on the delivery side.
Is there anything you can patent in these basically vanilla service companies?
Well, it would have to be the software. For example, they will all run off Uber-like software. So, if, for example, if you have the patent on the click, you're still getting a check every time someone clicks, right? If you have a patent on how to connect people together, then that is the patent itself. It's like GPS started out. You had to go to an electronics store and purchase it, and then it went from you purchasing it to your automobile, from your automobile to your cell phone. But the technology remains the same. And restaurants themselves, that is how tables are set and how they connect with their customers, are also using a lot of high-tech kinds of innovations to make sure that the customers come and have a great experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So let me take 2 seconds and do my Digital 360 Summit update. So happy to say that the Continental Automated Association of Buildings, or the Continental Automated Buildings Association, I should say, CABA. It's basically, I don't know if I'm sharing the right thing or not. There's definitely a delay. Can you guys see my screen?
I see your email.
You see my email?
Yes.
That's not what I want to share. Okay. Am I still sharing my email?
You're selling Digital 360 Summit.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Now it's working. It's fascinating how the delay. So anyway, so we had our summit last August, and that went really well. And these were the companies that joined us. And I'm happy to say that the Continental Association for Building Automation is sponsoring, has agreed to sponsor the Digital 360 Summit 2021. And I've seen a lot of events, and you may want to confirm that for me or no, but I've seen a lot of companies that have face-to-face events starting in May of next year. So it seems like face-to-face is coming back, obviously with whatever COVID guidelines, but I'm excited about that. And Ron Zimmer, this president CEO, is driving the Smart Buildings and Infrastructure session, which includes a keynote for 30 minutes and a panel for 1 hour. And so we're excited about that. And I want to shout out to TXST for sponsoring our digital roundtable. So let me come back to you guys and talk a couple of seconds about what's going on in smart cities. Actually, smart buildings first. Let me do smart buildings first. So interesting data point here, John and Llewelyn. Manufacturing, construction, and agriculture are supposed to drive 80% of the adoption of 5G in the UK. So this is a data point about the UK and how manufacturing, construction, and agriculture will be the three sectors that will drive 80% of the adoption and deployment of 5G. A very interesting data point. Hitachi recently announced a new IoT platform for smart buildings. Honeywell has just launched a new offering to improve air quality in commercial buildings. Big deal related to COVID, obviously. Verizon is deploying 5G at General Motor and Honeywell facilities in the United States. In Intel preview Wi-Fi 7.0, which we discussed briefly a while back. It's 50 gigabits per second, or roughly 5 times faster than Wi-Fi 6.0, which is 10 gigabits per second. So interesting data point, Llewelyn. The UK is going to be driven by 5G, primarily by manufacturing, construction, and agriculture. What do you think?
Well, I think it's very interesting. Certainly in smart cities, the UK has been very much ahead. Whole areas of London are designated to go smart. But I have detected across the whole smart city landscape some slowing down, possibly because of the virus and people are distracted. But the passion there was for smart cities, say 2 years ago, does not seem to be as great. I first heard about smart cities as a concept at the Edison Electric Institute 4 years ago. They've hardly breathed those 2 words since then. They've sort of backed off. I don't know why that is. I think they're also what happened in Toronto with Google and the great fear of loss of privacy, which Google had not taken into account, and they had not consulted people adequately. That also put something of a stick in the spokes of smart cities. I think they're coming, but they're coming more quietly, that it will be a gentle, slow evolution rather than a revolution, and that we will essentially in 10 years wake up and find that we live in a smart city that's getting smarter, because the room for exponential growth as we get 5G and other communications. The big issue, which I raised on this broadcast previously, is reliability of electric supply. With the recent weather, one of the foremost people I know in the electric business, Jan Vrins at Guidehouse, a great exponent of smart cities and electricity, just went 22 hours without any electricity in Miami because of weather. They have to do something about resilience, electric resilience, to make smart cities 100% acceptable.
Sure.
As it is, cities are in terrible trouble when the lights fail and the traffic lights fail and the elevators fail. You go to total reliance on electric dependent communications, and you have a terrible problem when you get a fail. Now, it may come with storage, we may get enough electric storage, but all the storage we see now is over in about 8 hours. We don't have any storage that looks as though it will last for 22 hours, for example, which I just quoted in Florida.
Yeah. There are several elements on the smart city progress that, I want to share also, and then I get John back in here. So Lion reports first profitable quarter. That's one of the scooter companies. So interesting that they had all kind of disappear. They were focused on smart city, last mile transportation. But Lime is publicly traded, and they have a profitable quarter. Very interesting. The Boring Company, another one of Elon Musk companies, is showcasing their project in Vegas. And they're working actually, since they just moved to Austin, they're lobbying the governor to build a tunnel system between Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, and Houston. We'll see where that goes. And then Uber, it's selling their autonomous vehicle arm to a company called Aurora Innovation, primarily to unleash more wealth out of that, get return on investment. California regulators just approved at the PUC level a fare-based autonomous vehicle services for California. So the expectation is the autonomous vehicle taxis are coming. California has approved a business model and interesting stuff. And then the last thing I was going to share on smart cities is a pat in the back for John Butler and myself that City of Brownsville, Texas, has signed an agreement with us to build their smart city plan and project.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. Well, let's comment on the smart cities, because I am fascinated with the manufacturing, which of course will change. I mean, it's going to be 3D printing.
Mm-hmm.
I would go online and I might say I need to have a rake, and I might be able to print it out at home. So I think as we think about manufacturing in the future and smart cities,
Mm-hmm.
I think that things will be delivered electronically, and this is why we must get the electric grid so the lights will not go out.
Mm-hmm.
But we must transform our mind from the manufacturing of the late 1800s to the manufacturing of today that would be really, really related to 3D printing. And manufacturing would be some of the easiest things that we do. It'd be like flying an airplane. You just put in the coordinates and it gets you from Dallas to Houston without ever flying it.
Right.
Well, you just put it into the printer and said, I would like to print out a table, a rake, or whoever knows, an automobile in the future. So I think the manufacturing itself would change, and it would be quite different than the manufacturing that we literally talked about in the past.
There is a lot of 3D manufacturing going on now. I was surprised. I was at a very large manufacturing plant, how much is taking place very quietly.
Yeah.
It would seem to me, Johnny, that you might want to get as an investment, not into 3D printing, but into the feedstock, because an awful lot of feedstock will have to be delivered to print all these things.
I think so. And if you look at 5G and what we're doing in Texas, and the idea we want to do like the Northeast, we want trains between Houston and Dallas, Dallas to Hill Country, Dallas to Austin, fast trains like they have in Japan. We know that Herb Kelleher with Southwest Airlines really revitalized the Texas economy when he flew only in Texas, because, for me to drive from here to El Paso, it's 11 hours. And from Austin to Houston is 3 hours. And from Austin to Dallas is 4 hours by automobile.
Yep.
So I think that if you look at what's happening with the smart cities, all of the connectivity will be there. You will have emphasis on your train is here, your train is so many miles out, but more importantly, I think that the manufacturing will encompass now all cities. It would be just as clean, it would be very, very interesting, and it would be so high tech. So you have to imagine a hardware company online, and they print it out for you there, or you might even imagine that in the future you will have a printer in your home. Now, of course, you have to look at all of the different materials that need to be printed. But for the day, of course, it all comes from NASA, because NASA did not want to take anything to the moon. So 3D printing was the idea. When we get there, we need to print out a house. And in Austin, Texas, of course, they are now 3D printing homes.
Yeah.
So the manufacturing will be very interesting.
Yeah, I envision on that, John, a step where Home Depot and Lowe's will start having their 3D printing services, and they carry the material, and then you buy the blueprint, you send it to them, they print it for you, you go pay, then they deliver it to you, or however that happens.
Absolutely fascinating future that we're looking at.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What happened to levitating trains? We're going to have
That's
there was
still that's
huge,
still that's still being worked on. Semiconductors,
but it hasn't come with the speed or the cost benefits that were originally
yeah,
expected.
yeah. As long as you need a metal and electricity to create a magnetic field, it's not cheap, right? It's very expensive to do. So I think we're still, when it comes to atomic and managing electrons and protons and neutrons, we got probably another 20, 30 years to go to break the code on all that. But
As Llewelyn notes, sometimes these things just don't work. So we had the fastest airline in the world to fly us from New York to from New York to London to supersonic airplane. It was very interesting for business people. And then all of a sudden, because it had a crash leaving London, and all of a sudden the greatest airplane in the world is no more.
It was an extraordinary aeroplane. I was lucky enough to fly on it 3 times. And I also once was flying myself out of Washington National Airport, and I was going over past Dulles Airport, and the controller said, I bring the Concorde out, and he said, it's a joke. He said, that airplane can't fly when it's low and slow. So do you mind if I turn you out over Maryland? And he did, and I had the incredible opportunity to fly next to this beautiful airplane, the sun glinting on it, and then gradually it began to pick up momentum and off it went. It was just one of the most extraordinary experiences I had in flying airplanes. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But there wasn't demand. I think part of it was that it became very expensive, but also you had all the delay on both sides. So you're crossing the Atlantic in 3.5 hours, but you're taking 3 hours in London Airport and 3 hours at JFK in New York, or 2 hours. And that really reduced the sense of speed. And you weren't able to do business on the same day you flew, but not because the airplane was inadequate. The airplane, which I've looked into in some detail, was one of the great achievements of aviation, one of the great engineering achievements. Extraordinary what was done with it and how it performed. Once I went up into the cockpit of the French Concorde at 62,000 feet, and there's the pilot sitting with his feet on the console reading a newspaper, and the co-pilot is all probably flirting with the stewardess. That's before the security issues. And he said, Monsieur, what can I do? Mach 2.3, 62,000 feet, if there was something. And so he read the newspaper, and the airplane flew itself. Wonderful airplane. Very sad that we couldn't proceed with that technology.
Yeah.
I think so. But I think it will be back, but it's certainly lessons to be learned there.
Well, I think in the end, affordability, innovation that is just expensive for expensive sake doesn't make it, right? It needs to be affordable. It needs to make sense logically.
There was a miscalculation, and the miscalculation was the sonic boom. As a result, it couldn't fly over land, so it was confined to flying over oceans.
That's right.
When it went down to Texas from New York or from Washington, because it flew out of Washington Dulles too, it had to remain subsonic because you couldn't have a sonic boom across the country, let alone multiple sonic booms if you had any number of these aircraft deployed. And that's a real challenge for the future.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the set of elements to share with you all, it's on smart energy, right? Lots going on there. Primarily, California continues to lead the way on regulations and getting ready for energy storage and dealing with the blackouts and also, hydrogen is back in the charter in California. Sempra, one of the largest utilities, is proposing to use hydrogen. And so they're discussing that as a project. That's very interesting because electricity for heavy duty infrastructure is probably not as adequate as it could be, given the batteries have a short life, if you will. So the hydrogen fuel cells are probably more appropriate for heavy duty stuff. And then last but not least, a bunch of mayors across the United States agree on a $60 billion plan to support a Midwest energy transition away from coal into renewable energy and energy storage. And so it's interesting to see that, again, while many people worry about unemployment and what have you, that a significant number of the sort of the leadership in all segments of the country are driving transformation and acceleration of change dramatically. So,
Yeah, Andre, I think that when we look at, whether it's from my home, I just want my lights to come on.
Mm-hmm.
And renewable energy at affordable price, I think that's all good. I think the key is that as we move to these different kinds of energies, or smart energy, I'm not sure if that's an oxymoron or not, but it's as we move to these things, the consumer would just like to plug the automobile in. The consumer would like to make sure that the lights are on when needs be, that there are great backups when we have a storm or whatever have you. So I do think that with the emphasis on renewable and the emphasis on clean energy, whether it's windmills or hydrogen or whatever it can be, it must really, really have the test of efficiency. It must be there when the consumer would say, I think I need to, what time is it? So they're not too interested in the engineering of the watch. They just want to make sure that the watch tells a great time.
Yeah.
And as I look at all of the stuff on energy, renewable energy, and et cetera, I think it's fascinating, but the test of time will be, will it be there when I turn the lights on? So it's an interesting kind of commodity that has developed. And then of course, there's a value structure attached to it about saving the planet and et cetera. And I find that interesting also.
Absolutely. No, and again, we are witnessing all kinds of changes and baby steps in the right direction, if you will, and maybe some in the other right direction. But it's clearly, I think that, and I was talking to some other folks about, different multinationals last week. I get to talk to 40 or 50 companies every week because of all the things that I'm doing. But the COVID, they were all saying that COVID had been a godsend because it's accelerated and broken down all kinds of old myth around telecommuting and other things, and the impacts and the benefits on productivity and acceleration of innovation and the inclusion. So here's an interesting aspect. I'm curious what you all think. So it used to be in the design teams and in the key planning teams, strategy teams, sort of where you cut the cake in these companies, that only the people who were local to each other, face to face to each other, were the people who ultimately made the decisions, regardless of the journey of how these things came together in a global setting. Even though, teleconferencing was happening and, has been happening for 40 years, right? But now with COVID and Zoom and all the things that are going on, right, with different tools, now all of a sudden the engineer with the best ideas, that is not in the office, but because we're now all telecommuting, all of a sudden, all these folks, there was somewhat of a pecking order about, being in the office at headquarters versus not being at headquarters, that all of a sudden this COVID reality has equalized that pecking order, and the good ideas and the good feedback, and so all of a sudden people are getting promoted and being given more responsibility based on what they do and how they contribute and know where they're located. What do you all think about that?
Well, I think what has happened is that has flattened the decision making. I did a paper entitled Bubbling Up Good Ideas with Brian Stevens at Duke. And we looked at how ideas evolve in the context of a large company by just looking at emails. We had so everybody would upvote or downvote the great ideas. It was called bubbling up great ideas. So what that means now is that the open innovation that was so much applied to products is now applied to people. That is, they will not be able to see the 6'4" gorgeous John Butler walk down the hallway with his great ideas, and that will influence the ideas. So when you flatten everything, like any other organization, then it means that the hierarchical nature of the people it's important, but the idea is supreme. So I've seen that. I've done research on that, bubbling up good ideas. That's in the Computational Journal of Communications. So this global stuff, you remember the old commercial about, okay, yeah, I'm a one-person company, and now I'm competing with a great company from China just based on my idea and the internet.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. The ideas, the whole world now in terms of the innovation of ideas and people, it's flattened, and it doesn't matter where you are. So space, place is gone. Not completely gone, because people still were like together, but it was always evolving. You could look at the gaming industry, and that's where it was really, really prevalent in the gaming industry.
So
I think all of that is true, but you're only going to have the innovation while you keep companies needing to innovate. The moment they think they don't have to innovate, the moment they get on a plateau and become rent takers, things change, the dynamic changes, and new ideas do not get a hearing, let alone implemented, which is why so many companies were started by people who broke off from other companies who simply couldn't get anything done where they were. What I think is very interesting is to look at Rupert Murdoch, not in what he did, but how he did it. It was always with a tiny coterie of managers, no big committees, no big voted up, voted down. He voted it up or he voted it down. And of course, he made some big mistakes, like buying MySpace. On the other hand, he had some tremendous successes, not just in the politics of his products, but also in the products themselves. Fox News, when it came along, was revolutionary in the pace it brought to television news. It brought a kind of energy which wasn't there before. I know, because I worked as a television news writer in the UK before I came to the US. It just wasn't there. And when I came to America, it wasn't here. It was different. Walter Cronkite sent out an entirely different message than the one. It wasn't a highly energized newscast. He brought energy, but all of the decisions that made the Murdoch empire, and I'm no admirer of his political views, but all the decisions were essentially made by himself, the mistakes and the successes. And this is very unusual, and you don't get this in large public companies normally. And that really does make a big mistake. We look back into history and we see these great figures who change things. Bessemer, the steel man, or Carnegie, or any of these people. They were all very individualistic, and they were not the products of large companies. Jack Welch took General Electric and made it very profitable for a while. Of course, the hangover was tremendous. But here was a public company where an individual grabbed it and ran with it. But that's quite unusual. Yeah. Committees are more common. Caution tends to be very prevalent, especially when you're worried about the stock price on a quarterly return, not on a 5-year return. So I worry about big companies and what they finally do to innovation, which I fear is tamp it down rather than exploiting it.
I agree with that. And part of that is due to the lawyers. So if you have a great idea, as Einstein said, well, I have a great idea, but I'm gonna prove it. I'll prove it to you later. Right.
Well, General Motors, which was held up as the managerial masterpiece, in fact, the very rigid management structure became the end. Music time. Play on, maestro.
No, I would just back you up there.
I thought Amarillo was a great addition to
Well,
the
hello
repertoire.
there. It's been a long, long time. How am I doing? You know I'm doing fine. You know it's been so long now. You know it seems like that it was only yesterday. Gee, ain't it funny how time slips away? I hadn't seen you guys in a long time, but it was good to see you.
Good. It's been good. Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
Okay.
Stop broadcasting now and stop recording.
Okay.
And